Good afternoon. Welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Mike Hubbard. I am the Inspector Instructor for 3rd Battalion, 25th Marines. The United States Marine Corps, in partnership with the City of Cleveland, is rolling out the Marine Week Cleveland Speaker Series, which will bring senior Marine Corps leadership to Cleveland to discuss current relevant topics to the nation. We started in February, and we will continue through March and Marine Week, which will take place in June. The Speaker Series will focus on a variety of issues, including the ongoing operations in Afghanistan, NATO in the 21st century, the next chapter of NASA space exploration, as well as leadership skills from the combat zone to the boardroom, to the classroom, and innovative medical developments assisting our returning wounded warriors. I am very pleased today to introduce Brigadier General Loretta Reynolds. Brigadier General Reynolds is a Commanding General, Marine Corps Recruit Depot, and the Commanding General, Eastern Recruiting Region. She is the first female Marine commander of Recruiting Depot Parris Island, where she took command in June of 2011. Brigadier General Reynolds was commissioned in the Marine Corps in May of 1986 after graduating from the United States Naval Academy. She attended Marine Corps University's Command and Control Systems course, the Naval War College, and the Army War College. She is deployed to both Iraq and Afghanistan. In March of 2009, she assumed command of the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force Headquarters Group at Camp Pendleton, California. She deployed the group to Camp Leatherneck, Afghanistan from March 2010 to March of 2011, where the group supported the efforts of the 1st MEF Ford Regional Command Southwest in the Helmand Province. Brigadier General Reynolds is a communications officer, and her hometown is in Baltimore, Maryland. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome General Reynolds.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Hubbard. Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank you for your time this afternoon, and really the very kind welcome that we have received here in Cleveland, and also for the great support that your Marines are receiving here in Cleveland. It's been wonderful to be here. It's my absolute pleasure to be here to talk with you this afternoon about combat leadership and the role of women in the military, and more specifically today, women in your Marine Corps. So I know a little bit about this topic. I've been a Marine for almost 26 years now, and for that whole time, I was a female. So I've had the great fortune of being able to deploy my commands twice overseas, once in Iraq and once in Afghanistan. And in my current job, I have the responsibility of overseeing the training of all new female enlisted Marines who join the Marine Corps. So what you'll get today from me is a little of my own experience, and I hope a new way to look at some old and sometimes trite terms that we hear in the debate about women in combat and leadership in combat. So let's begin with this term, women in combat. So often in my career, I've been involved in debates or been a bystander to debates where the role of women in combat is discussed. And there are passionate arguments on both sides about what right looks like. Some argue that women are entitled to serve in whatever capacity they may be physically qualified for. Some see the opening of combat specialties as a civic right. Others will talk about the male instinct to protect the women of its society and the distraction that would cause if those women were serving beside them in combat. We talk about physical qualifications and cultural norms, and we talk about logistical challenges associated with opening specialties and units up to women. But I'm not here today to persuade you one way or the other on the way forward. I would, however, like to offer a different viewpoint for discussion. That viewpoint is that increasingly experts are realizing that peacekeeping and peacemaking operations that fail to engage or include the women in a given society will fail. Any discussion we have about the role of women in the military should perhaps first be viewed through the prism about the fundamental need for a nation's military. What is it that you require your military to do for you? And then how do women contribute to that requirement? Let me more fully explain. In October 2010, while I was still deployed to Afghanistan, I was asked by my commanding general, General Mills, to represent him at an international conference in Denmark on the role of women in global security. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this was not a gathering of military men and women talking about global security. This was ambassadors, businessmen and women, politicians, lawyers, media members, and educators talking about women, not only as victims of conflict, but as leaders, especially in helping to end conflict, develop post-conflict reintegration efforts, and economic life. And the thesis of the conference was that for too long, the needs of women have not been included in peacekeeping and post-conflict planning, and that with a broader view of the influence that female leaders can have across the globe, lasting peace can be sustained. In fact, the exclusion of women from the peace process can, in fact, undermine the peace. 12 years ago now, the United Nations passed UN Security Council Resolution 1325, which held that women must play an important role in preventing and resolving conflict and in building peace. Some nations have acted very deliberately in executing this Security Council resolution. Others have not. In 2010, 10 years after its passing, the United States announced plans to form a national action plan on the resolution. But what was intriguing about this thesis was this broad notion that advocated increased roles for women, not as a matter of civic rights or legal or affirmative action, but as a matter of national and global security. Soren Pind, who's the Danish Minister of Development Cooperation, said at the conference, "You won't find a fragile state that supports the rights of women. And you won't find a stable society that neglects the role of women. I believe that the stability and development of a society are directly interlinked with the rights and activities of its women. We must take up the dual challenge of working in fragile states and of pursuing the women, peace, and security agenda." Let me illustrate this notion a little bit further. My favorite author is Stephen Pressfield. He wrote a book some years ago called Gates of Fire that describes a classic battle of the Thermopylae Pass where 300 Spartans fought to the death against an overwhelming Persian army. The Persians represented a real threat to the city-states of Greece and Western democratic thought. And in this book, the Spartan king Leonidas must decide which men he will take with him to defend the pass and slow the advance of the Persians. Leonidas knew that the 300 Spartans would die, but he worried about how Sparta would react to their deaths. If Sparta fell, Greece would fall, and with it, the West. And Leonidas knew that at the decisive hour, Sparta would look to the women, to the wives and mothers of the fallen. And so Leonidas chose his warriors for the courage of their women and for the strength of their wives and mothers to bear up under the loss. So on the strength of the women, Sparta was saved. So with these thoughts in mind, we must ask ourselves if we are properly postured in the United States military, in the Corps, to best engage this other half of the population of these nations we find ourselves in. The world is unsettled. If past is prologue, the future will not be quiet for your military, even after we come home from Afghanistan. Ladies and gentlemen, what do you want your military to do? What do you need your Marine Corps to do to secure and sustain peace in the future? Now, I can say with certainty in Afghanistan that what was discussed in Denmark was put into action on the ground in Helmand Province with outstanding result. The Marine Corps created, trained, and deployed female engagement teams beginning in 2009. The female engagement teams, or FET, as we called them, were an ad hoc organization of female Marines who were attached out in 3 to 4 man teams to augment battle space owners, that is, battalion commanders, who were spread around the province as they executed counterinsurgency operations. Led by a sergeant or a corporal, non-commissioned officers with anywhere from 3 to perhaps 6 years in the Marine Corps, the FET was tasked in 5 mission areas as they executed the battle space owners' engagement priorities: education reform, community and personal relations, women's governance, business and economic development, and health reform. So in practice, as a young infantry company commander would begin to engage with the population in his area, he would assign the FET, if he was fortunate to have them with him, to accompany his platoons to engage with the local women. And in almost every case, the presence of the women Marines put a different face on the Corps. Their presence de-escalated tense situations, literally and figuratively opened doors for leaders to walk through, increased information gathering, and provided much greater context and depth to the village history that the commander was developing. In many cases, through trust that was built with both the local men and the women, the FET was tipped off to the presence of illicit actors, or IEDs, well before the other Marines. And of course, their presence enabled commanders a personnel search capability for the local women that respected cultural sensitivities while enhancing security for all of the Marines. The women chosen for the FET were volunteers, trained in the language, culture, and history of Afghanistan. They were physically prepared through an aggressive training period that included martial arts. They were given refresher training on infantry tactics, patrolling, weapons systems application, and they were prepared for the hardship of life in an infantry company. They were pulled from every occupational specialty in the Marine Corps, and even today they continue to acquit themselves with distinction. They are strategic enablers for the MEF commander. Anecdotally, as the first deployment of the FET came to an end, one of the COs of a relieving unit brought all of the patrol leaders from a Marine battalion that was getting ready to go home into a room, and he asked them what would they like to have had more of to be more successful in their deployment. And instead of hearing that they needed more weapons or ammo or supplies, the number one answer from the corporals and the sergeants was we needed more female engagement teams. I think what the Marine Corps has learned through the FET experience is that women are much more effective at engaging with other women. We should act on these lessons learned as we contemplate future national security challenges. But ladies and gentlemen, a word of caution to you on this discussion of women in combat. And that is to say that words matter. Women have been in combat for years. In just the past 10 years of war, 282 women in the Marine Corps have earned the Combat Action Ribbon. They have gone where their training and their job specialties have taken them in this fight, and they have earned their place in our Corps' great history. Women are driving trucks and flying planes, building roads, installing and maintaining communication networks, providing intelligence, moving supplies, maintaining aircraft, managing complex supply networks. Women are lawyers, administrators, civil affairs specialists, logisticians, strategic planners, linguists, public affairs specialists, administrators, combat engineers, generator mechanics, and a whole lot of other necessary jobs that make the Marine Corps the combined arms team that it must be. Today in the Marine Corps, 6% of the officer corps is female, and 7% of our total enlisted force are females. 90% of all military occupational specialties are open to women. This equates to a total of 68% of all active component positions that are open to the assignment of women. To date, in the global war on terrorism, 7 women have given their lives. 41 were wounded in action in Iraq. 22 have been wounded in action in Afghanistan. 7,417 women earned the Iraq Campaign Medal, while 4,079 have earned the Afghanistan Campaign Medal. Of these, as I've already said, 282 have earned the Combat Action Ribbon, 46 the Purple Heart, 42 have been awarded the Bronze Star Medal, 37 women have earned the Combat V for valor. In the Corps, in fact, at my command at Parris Island, South Carolina, we choose to continue to conduct segregated recruit training for our men and women. We do this because we believe that this training period must be an intense, physically and emotionally demanding and focused 13-week period that should be free from distractions. It works. And today, as Congress contemplates increasing roles for women in combat, the Corps has requested permission to allow the initial assignment of women to select ground combat element units down to the battalion level in those occupational specialties that are already open to female Marines. That is to say, women in specialties already open to them will be allowed to serve in units that have traditionally been closed to the assignment of women. For example, our artillery battalions, assault amphibian battalions, or low-altitude air defense battalions. This would open up an additional 371 billets across the Marine Corps for the assignment of women. In my own experience, I was selected to be a general officer a year ago, and I was assigned to take command down at Parris Island. And because I was the first female assigned there was a great deal of press that covered my career. One of the things that was mentioned was that I was the first woman to command battle space. So what that means is that as the CO, as the commanding officer of the MEF headquarters group and the commanding officer of Camp Leatherneck, I was assigned a mission to secure the area of operations surrounding Camp Leatherneck, which was the large camp that was the home of the Marines headquarters in Helmand Province. Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to report to you that my assignment as a battle space owner in Afghanistan was simply a byproduct of my role as the camp commander at Camp Leatherneck. I cannot say that my commanding general at the time thought twice about that being a first for anybody, nor did I. It was simply what my job required that I do, and I did it. I trained for it. I had a subordinate battalion assigned to me to secure and conduct counterinsurgency ops in the area, and we worked in a coalition of U.S., UK, Danish, Afghan, and even Bahraini policemen to get the job done. It was not until I was selected to the rank of Brigadier General that anyone noticed that a woman had been assigned battle space. These sorts of things are happening all over your military today. Ladies and gentlemen, leading in combat, whether you are a man or a woman, requires the same basic skills, training, and clarity of mind. It also, importantly, requires that the leader understand his ethical obligation to society. Some years ago, I watched a presentation from a man named Dr. Richard Gabriel on military ethics. And he summarized military ethics in 3 basic tenets. 1, service to societal survival. If we fail in the military, society fails. 2, the level of personal obligation and responsibility of the military leader. In the military, we have been given the right to spend the lives of other members of society in order to save society. No other organization is given that responsibility. And number 3, the level of personal liability. We're sometimes asked to offer our own lives for society. So you see, ladies and gentlemen, combat leadership is not business leadership. Nor is it just about physical bravery and potential. It is also the moral and ethical readiness to defend the nation's security by sometimes offering up the very men and women you have promised to lead. And while in my own combat experiences I have not been challenged in the way that many of my peers have been in this regard, I have faced the loss of Marines in combat and have faced the parents of the Marines I lost in combat. And what I learned through that experience is that I was grateful that I believed in what we were doing, in the manner in which we executed the fight, and that I and the rest of the leadership in my battalion did all that we knew to do to train and prepare our Marines for the dangers of the combat we faced. Marine Corps teaches a great deal about leadership traits and principles. In my experience, both in combat and in garrison, there are 6 basic qualities that a Marine seeks in his leaders. They are, number 1, leaders must be physically and morally healthy and capable of leading from the front. They must inspire desired outcomes not merely with words, but through personal example. Number 2, leaders must provide all of the right training and tools to properly do the job they're being asked to do. This implies a technical understanding of the job and the formula to accomplish success. Leaders must be technically proficient and must provide Marines every opportunity to also become proficient. Number 3, leaders must believe in their Marines' ability to succeed. And when the mission is suspect, leaders must be willing to speak truth to power on behalf of his or her Marines. Number 4, leaders must willingly share in the hardships of their Marines. The Corps teaches servant leadership, and that officers eat last. You take care of your Marines before you take care of yourself. Number 5, leaders must always take care of the families while their Marines are away. You must relieve them as much as possible of the burden of the worry they have about home. Their families become your burden to carry. And number 6, leaders must relieve their Marines of the burden of responsibility that follows a difficult but right decision that results in death or injury of a fellow Marine in the execution of the mission. I have found in my own experience leading a battalion and a regimental-sized unit in combat that focusing on achieving this level of combat leadership fitness is not dependent on gender. It's about physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional preparation, professional and personal integrity, fitness, and love for your nation and your Marines. Now, I began this by talking about the evolving role of women in global security issues and the need to grow leaders who can engage effectively with the women of the globe. I talked to you about the female engagement teams and the model they provide for this type of engagement. As we move forward in the women in combat debate, I hope that the issues of how best positioned we are as a nation to effectively engage whole populations become central to that discussion. I hope that these discussions do not get mirrored or mired in how many specialties are opened up, or where or how quickly people can get promoted in those specialties. Militaries with their own set of military ethics are different. They exist to preserve society. And while they must be careful never to grow distant from the society they serve, there is a difference in what your military is called to do. I spoke with you about combat leadership and the need for ethical clarity, solid leadership fundamentals by combat leaders. My experience in the Marine Corps is that leaders are chosen based on the quality of their performance and leadership and not by their gender. That is as it should be. Our Marines deserve the best leadership that we can offer them. In the same way, the American people deserve the best military that it can afford. Your Marine Corps is the nation's expeditionary force in readiness. When the nation is least ready, we will be the most ready. Ready to fight if necessary, ready to defend always, ready to engage and secure the peace, and ready to lead. Thank you for hosting me. Enjoy Marine Week.
Today at the City Club, we are listening to a special program featuring Brigadier General Reynolds, Commanding General, Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Parris Island, and Commanding General, Eastern Recruiting. We will return momentarily for our traditional City Club questions. We encourage you to formulate your questions for our speaker and remind you that the questions should be brief and to the point. We welcome you here, especially those who are guests. We hope you will join the City Club and become active in our ongoing civic dialogue. We hope all of you will join us on April 19th when Marine Week Cleveland Speaker Series welcomes Brigadier General Paul Kennedy, Director, U.S. Marine Corps Public Affairs, who will discuss caring for our nation's wounded warriors. If you wish to make reservations for next week's programs or order a CD or DVD of today's program, please call 1-888-223-6786 or 216-621-0082. We are pleased to present this program in support of several parties, including the City Club of Cleveland, Marine Week Cleveland, the City of Brook Park, and many, many others. Now we would like to return to our speaker for our traditional City Club questions and answers. We welcome questions from everyone, including the guest. Holding the microphone today is City Club Program Director Carrie Miller. Now for our first question.
General, thank you and your colleagues for your service. You had mentioned that currently 6% of the officer corps is female. In addition to increasing the slots open, are there plans to increase the participation of women in the Marines overall, increase the percentage of female Marines among the total complement?
Sir, the number of women that we bring into the Marine Corps has been based on the number of available billets that they could be assigned to. So with this addition of an additional 370 billets, if Congress approves that, yes, sir, then that we could then raise the number of women that come in.
General, good afternoon. Welcome to Cleveland.
Thank you.
A broader recruiting question. With the duration of this conflict, has the Corps seen an impact on recruiting in general, still with the all-volunteer force? How are the numbers?
The numbers are better than they have ever been. We are bringing in a higher quality applicant than we have ever seen. Major Greg Jones is here. He's my recruiting station commander here in Cleveland. He happens to be #1 in the region, by the way. We're doing very well here in Cleveland. But the quality of young men and women that we bring into the Marine Corps right now is better than it's ever been. When they come down to Parris Island, they are making it at higher rates than they have ever made it, and I think that's because they're waiting, in some cases, 6, 7, 8 months before we can ship them to recruit training. So that's all good, because the numbers say that the longer they stay in the pool program, the better prepared they are at recruit training, and the better prepared they are, the longer they stay in the Marine Corps. I mean, so it's all a good news story. I think what you find is that this generation is very service-minded. They want to serve. They want to do something meaningful. And certainly being a Marine is meaningful. So we're doing very well. Thank you for asking.
Can you talk a little bit about women's experience in the service? We mostly have what we hear in the news, which is often negative, and can you shed some light on that and talk a little bit more broadly about the experience for women?
Well, it depends on what you mean by the experience. I mean, my experience will be different than the sergeant's experience, but I can generally tell you that you know, I'm still a Marine 26 years later because I can't imagine doing anything differently. I can't imagine working with a finer group of people than I do in the Marine Corps. And as a female, people always ask me, well, was it hard? I don't know. I mean, it was the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps is hard for a reason. I don't think it's easy for anybody to be a Marine officer. You have to dig deep. Have I faced issues being a female? In my experience, no. I'm a brigadier general. This didn't just happen because I would have been miserable for 26 years. I love being a Marine. I love commanding Marines. So I have to tell you that my experience has been very, very positive.
General, I'm quite interested in the examples you gave of the female engagement teams,
Right.
FETs. The majority of the military activity is in a part of the world where the cultures have
Right.
significantly different norms with respect to the relationship between the sexes. What did you find, or did you, when the FETs went out and engaged with the women in the countryside, was there pushback from the men of that culture? Was there resentment that there was a relationship between women based on gender that was that had difficult aspects for the men of that culture to accommodate? I mean, you said the results were very positive, but I can also see that there would be, on the other side of the fence, challenges for them to figure out how to
Right.
accommodate that kind of a relationship.
Right. I think we were actually very surprised to find the number of men who were willing to talk to our female Marines. What I think we expected to find was that if they allowed the women to talk to their women at all, that it would be a female-only discussion over there in the corner, and you don't ever come into my compound, you can talk to her out there, or whatever. But what we actually found was that the more the women were out there, and the more that they developed relationships in the community, the more the men wanted to engage with those women as well. And so when I suggested to you that, we got more tips about, the Taliban and night letters and things like that, sometimes those came from the men, and they would tell the women. So, in fact, a whole lot more than we anticipated, really. What we were trying to do with the FET was, engage with the other half, find out what the women think, what do the women need. When you are working in a counterinsurgency environment, you're trying to, build local governance, you're trying to fix education, which is clearly broken under the Taliban. You're trying to do a whole life makeover for these folks. And so, yes, sir. I mean, in some cases, the men didn't want their women to have anything to do with these females. Didn't actually, in a lot of cases, they viewed them as kind of a third category. So there was the males, and then there was the women, and then there were these women Marines. Like, we don't really know what to do with them. But the more that they saw them, the more that they began to understand we really are not here to kill you or to take your land, or we're here to help you. And so it ended up as a very positive experience in almost every case.
Can you talk a little bit about success in basic training and TBS between the sexes, and also retention career-wise? Are there disparities? Are they tracking similar?
Yeah, that's a good question. Career-wise, I think in our enlisted population, we're not seeing any huge disparities between the men and the women. It's a little bit different in the officer populations. What we're finding in the Marine Corps is that we have to work hard to keep our female captains in to become career Marines, because they get that point where they want to go have a family. They've done this Marine Corps thing for 4 or 5 years. They want to go have a family, and being a Marine officer is there's a commitment there, and it's very, very difficult to do both things well. I'm single. I don't know how some of my peers who have stayed in and had families, they're Wonder Women. They're unbelievable. And there are some very, very strong and fine women who have done that. I just couldn't have done it myself. And so we're working on that right now, because we recognize that you have to be able to have a career and a family. And so we're working on that. And that would be the biggest disparity that we see, is right around that captain to major rank. You see, and this again, it goes to this whole women in combat discussion. When folks look at the numbers of women in senior positions, well, you have to work it all the way down to the bottom to figure out, well, why aren't there more women as general officers in the Marine Corps? Well, I don't know, but when you lose half of your captains, right? It may not be because it's their MOS. It may be because a lot of them got out a lot earlier for reasons that are not a broken Marine Corps. it's about life choices. And so we're working on that. We recognize that we have to find a way to make it so that women can do both and do both well. Did that answer your question? Okay.
How success rates out of the training?
Success rates out of training, our attrition, and the enlisted attrition for our females is about 4% higher, generally speaking, than the males. Right now we're at, the standard is about 11%. We expect that we're going to lose about 11% total as they come down to Parris Island. The women hover about that, and recently our male attrition it's down to 4%, 5%. It's really low. The officer candidates, the attrition for women is a little bit higher than the males, and some of that is just they're physically breaking because it's a very physically demanding program at officer candidate school. So, that answer your question?
General, I couldn't help notice from your bio and your introduction, you're an Annapolis graduate. What prompted the decision to take a commission in the Corps versus the Navy?
I have to be careful because one of my classmates is sitting right there, and he went into the Navy. So, what prompted? If you want a funny story, I'll tell you what I tell people, and it really is. There's a whole lot of truth to it. I was absolutely convinced when I went to the academy. This was kind of in the early days of women at the academy. So we went in 1982, and the first class of women graduated in 1980. So I came from an all-girls Catholic high school, and I'm the youngest of 5 girls. And so when I showed up to the Naval Academy, it was like, hello. But I also was informed, I was told that they were going to try to break me. The men were going to try to break you. So I knew that. I didn't take any of that personally. And I absolutely resolved that they were never going to see me cry. And they didn't. And so early on, my upperclassmen would say, oh, Reynolds, you think you're tough. You want to be a Marine. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe, I don't know, I guess. That was my first thought. My upperclassmen said, you'd make a good Marine. And so I thought more about that. I looked around at the Marine officers at the Naval Academy, and sure enough, that's exactly what I wanted to be. I wanted to be like them. And so that's how I am, 26 years later, still a Marine officer.
Can you talk a little bit, are you seeing a difference in reacclimation between women and men when they are done with their service and they come back to civilian life? Are you seeing a difference in the ability to reacclimate to civilian life?
Aside from the men wanting to grow beard and long hair, that happens. They do. They get out after a haircut a week, and everybody wants facial hair and long, which doesn't happen with the women. I can guarantee you. No, I would say that no. Generally speaking, there isn't a huge difference. I will tell you, you see some of these senior enlisted women, especially in the Marine Corps. They're some of the most phenomenally professional women you will ever find in any environment, bar none. They have proved their mettle, and sometimes when you find that when they get out of the Marine Corps, they miss it a whole lot more than a lot of other people do. They're just a very, very sharp group of women. So, but our goal in the Marine Corps is to return quality citizens of both genders, and we hope that we're doing that well. Good. Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Today at the City Club, we have been listening to a special program featuring Brigadier General Reynolds, Commanding General, Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Parris Island, and Commanding General, Eastern Recruiting. Thank you, General, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This program is now adjourned.